The girl with the dark braids stood at the train station platform speaking words that sounded like music to those who understood them, her hands moving gracefully as she helped an elderly Polish woman comprehend what the railway official was trying to tell her about luggage claims and connecting trains. It was the spring of 1883 in La Junta, Colorado, and the railway station had become a crossroads for immigrants traveling west, many of them speaking languages that the station staff could not understand. Greta Werner had arrived 6 months earlier from Germany with her father, who had promptly died of pneumonia 3 weeks after their arrival, leaving her alone in this new country at the age of 20. She had started working at the station out of necessity, translating for the German speakers at first, then discovering she had a gift for languages that extended beyond her native tongue. She had picked up Polish from the families passing through, then Czech, then Russian, absorbing words and phrases like a sponge absorbs water. William Harper noticed her on a Tuesday afternoon when he came to the station to pick up a shipment of barbed wire for the ranch where he worked. He was 24 years old, tall and lean from long days in the saddle, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of prairie grass after rain. He had grown up on ranches, moving from one to another as his father chased work across Colorado and Kansas, learning the hard lessons of cattle and horses and the kind of loneliness that came from wide open spaces. The woman was speaking to a family of Russians, her voice patient and kind as she helped them understand the ticket prices to Denver. William found himself standing there holding his receipt for the barbed wire, watching the way her whole face changed when she smiled at the youngest child, a boy of perhaps 5 who was clinging to his mother's skirts. "Can I help you with something?" The station manager, a portly man named Curtis, asked William. "Just waiting on my shipment," William said, dragging his attention away from the woman. "That would be at the freight office, other side of the building," Curtis said with barely concealed impatience. William felt his ears heat with embarrassment and left quickly. But the image of the woman stayed with him as he loaded the heavy rolls of wire into the wagon, as he drove the 12 miles back to the Bar 7 ranch, as he ate his dinner in the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands. "You are quieter than usual," observed Miguel, who worked alongside William and had become something close to a friend over the past 2 years. "Just tired," William said, but it was not the truth. He returned to the station 3 days later with a feeble excuse about checking on another shipment that did not exist. The woman was there again, this time helping a German family, and he realized with a start that she was speaking their language as fluently as she had spoken Russian. He bought a newspaper he did not need and sat on one of the wooden benches, pretending to read while he listened to her voice. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost foreign to this dusty railway town, with dark hair that she wore in a thick braid down her back and eyes that were a startling light brown, almost amber in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the station windows. But it was not just her appearance that drew him. It was the way she touched the old German man's shoulder gently when he seemed confused, the way she knelt down to speak to the children at their level, the way she seemed to genuinely care about these strangers passing through her life. When the German family moved on toward their platform, she turned and caught William staring at her. For a moment their eyes met, and he saw something flicker across her face, curiosity perhaps, or maybe just the acknowledgement that he was being obvious. He looked down at his newspaper quickly, his heart pounding harder than it should have been. The next time he came to the station, he brought a legitimate reason. He was picking up a saddle he had ordered from a craftsman in Denver. Greta was helping a Polish woman with 3 small children, and he made himself busy with his saddle, checking the stitching and the quality of the leather, until the Polish family had moved on. "You have been here several times this week," Greta said, and he looked up to find her standing a few feet away, her hands folded in front of her apron. "Ranch business," he said, which was not entirely a lie but not entirely the truth either. "I see." She had a slight accent, enough that he could tell English was not her first language, but her words were clear and precise. "You are from one of the ranches nearby, the Bar 7, about 12 miles north," he said. "I am William Harper." "Greta Werner," she said. "I work here as a translator." "I noticed," he said. "I have never heard someone speak so many languages before." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I have always been good with words. My father used to say I could talk to stones if I wanted to." "Your father, is he here in La Junta?" The smile faded. "He died this winter. Pneumonia." "I am sorry," William said, and he meant it. He knew what it was like to lose a parent. His own mother had died giving birth to a sister who had not survived either, back when he was 12. "Thank you," Greta said quietly. "It has been difficult, but the work helps. These people, they need someone to help them understand this new place." An elderly Czech man approached then, speaking rapidly and gesturing toward the ticket window, and Greta excused herself to help him. William left with his saddle, but he could not stop thinking about her, about the sadness in her eyes when she mentioned her father, about the way she seemed to carry the weight of all these immigrants' confusion and fear on her slim shoulders. He started coming to the station regularly, always with some small excuse, and slowly they began to talk. He learned that she was 20 years old, that she had grown up in a small village in Germany where her father had been a teacher, that she had learned to read in 4 languages before she was 10. She learned that he had spent his whole life working with cattle and horses, that he had never been to school, but had taught himself to read using an old Bible and whatever newspapers he could find, that he had once wanted to have his own ranch, but had long since accepted that it would probably never happen. Their conversations were brief, stolen moments between her translations and his imagined errands, but William found himself living for those moments, for the way she listened to him, as though what he said actually mattered, for the way her eyes lit up when she talked about words and languages, and the music she heard in different tongues. It was Miguel who finally pointed out the obvious. "You are in love with the translator girl," he said one evening as they were mending fence line. "I barely know her," William protested. "You go to the station every other day, and you come back looking like someone hit you over the head with a fence post," Miguel said. "That is love, my friend." "She probably thinks I am a fool," William said. "Then you should do something about it," Miguel said. "Talk to her properly. Ask if you can court her." But William knew it was not that simple. What did he have to offer a woman like Greta? He lived in a bunkhouse with 7 other men, owned little more than his saddle and his clothes, and made $30 a month when the work was good. She was educated, cultured, spoke multiple languages. She could probably find work in Denver or even San Francisco doing something far more prestigious than helping immigrants at a small railway station. Still, he could not stay away from her, and he began to notice things. The way her dress was mended in several places, carefully done but visible if you looked closely. The way she brought her lunch in a small tin pail, usually just bread and cheese, sometimes an apple. The thin shawl she wore even as spring turned to summer, as though she did not have a lighter one. She was poor, he realized. As poor as he was, maybe poorer. It should not have mattered, but somehow it made her seem more real to him, more reachable. One afternoon in early June, he found her sitting on the bench outside the station during what must have been a break from work. She was reading a book with a worn leather cover, and when he approached, she looked up with that smile that made his chest feel tight. "No ranch business today?" she asked. "Not today," he admitted. "I just wanted to see you." The honesty seemed to surprise her. She closed her book, marking her place with a ribbon. Why? It was a fair question, and it deserved a truthful answer. Because I enjoy talking to you. Because when I am here, I feel like I am more than just another ranch hand. Because you make me want to be better than I am. She looked at him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. You do not need to be better, William Harper. You are kind and honest, and those are rare qualities. May I sit with you? He asked. She moved over on the bench, making room, and he sat down, his hat in his hands. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the people come and go from the station. What are you reading? He finally asked. She showed him the cover. It was in German, the title incomprehensible to him. It is poetry, she said, by Heinrich Heine. My father gave it to me before we left Germany. It is one of the few things I have left of home. Would you read some to me? He asked. You would not understand it, she said. I would understand your voice, he said. So she read to him in German, her voice soft and musical. And even though he did not understand the words, he heard the emotion in them, the longing and the beauty and the sadness. When she finished the poem, she translated it for him, haltingly at first, trying to find the right English words to match the German ones. That is beautiful, he said when she was done. Sad but beautiful. Much of life is like that, she said. Sad but beautiful. They sat together until her break was over, and when she went back inside, William made a decision. If he was going to court Greta Werner properly, he needed to offer her something more than just his interest. He needed to show her that he understood what mattered to her, that he was willing to meet her in her world rather than expecting her to come entirely into his. That evening in the bunkhouse, he asked Miguel a question that had been forming in his mind all afternoon. Do you think you could teach me Spanish? Miguel looked up from the letter he was writing to his mother in Santa Fe. Spanish. Why? Because if I can learn another language, maybe I can understand what it is that Greta loves about them, William said. Miguel studied him for a moment, then smiled. For love I will teach you, but it will not be easy. You must practice every day. I will, William promised. So began William's education in Spanish. Every evening after work, Miguel would spend an hour teaching him words and phrases, correcting his pronunciation, making him repeat things until he got them right. The other ranch hands thought it was hilarious at first, listening to William stumble over the unfamiliar sounds, but they got used to it and eventually started helping, teaching him the colorful phrases and words that Miguel was too polite to include in his lessons. William practiced while he rode fence lines, while he moved cattle, while he lay in his bunk at night waiting for sleep. He filled the margins of old newspapers with Spanish words, trying to commit them to memory. It was harder than anything he had ever done, harder than breaking a green horse or surviving a blizzard in an inadequate lined shack, but he kept at it. When he felt confident enough to string together a few sentences without embarrassing himself completely, he went back to the station. Greta was there, helping a Mexican family with their tickets, and he waited until she was finished before approaching her. Buenos dias, he said, his heart pounding. Como está usted? She turned to him with wide eyes. You are learning Spanish. I am trying to, he said, slipping back into English. Miguel is teaching me. I wanted to understand what you hear when people speak in different languages. Her expression was unreadable for a moment, and he worried that he had done something foolish, that she thought he was mocking her somehow. But then her face softened into something that looked almost like wonder. That is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time, she said quietly. I want to understand your world, he said. My world is words, she said. So you are learning words for me. I am trying to, he said, though I am not very good at it yet. You said good morning and how are you perfectly well, she said. That is a good start. Over the following weeks, William continued his Spanish lessons with Miguel while also beginning to learn a few words of German from Greta during their conversations at the station. She seemed charmed by his efforts, even when he mangled the pronunciation of German words so badly that she had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. "You are trying to say bread, but you are actually saying leg," she said one afternoon, her eyes dancing with amusement. "How is anyone supposed to hear the difference?" he asked, frustrated but also enjoying the way her laughter sounded. "Practice," she said. "The same way you learn to ride a horse or rope a steer. You practice until your mouth knows what to do." So he practiced, and slowly, painfully slowly, he began to get better. He learned to hear the subtle differences in sounds that had seemed identical to him at first. He learned that languages had rhythms and patterns, that they were like music in the way Greta had always said. One evening in July, as the sun was setting over the prairie and turning the sky the color of fire, Greta agreed to walk with him after she finished her work at the station. They strolled down the main street of La Junta, past the general store and the saloon and the church with its white steeple. "Tell me about Germany," William said. "What was your home like?" Greta was quiet for a moment, as though gathering her memories. It was a small village in Bavaria, very old, with houses that had been standing for hundreds of years. "My father taught at the school, and we lived in rooms above the schoolhouse. In the spring, the hills would be covered with wildflowers. In the winter, everything would be white with snow, so deep sometimes that we could not open the door." "Why did you leave?" he asked. "My father wanted a better life for us," she said. "He had heard that in America, even poor people could own land, could build something for themselves. He saved for 5 years to buy our passage. But then he got sick on the ship, and he never fully recovered. By the time we arrived in New York, he was already weak. We made it as far as La Junta before he could not travel anymore." "I am sorry," William said. "That must have been terribly hard." "It was," she said. "There were days after he died when I did not think I could continue. But then I started working at the station, and I realized that I could use my languages to help people, to make their journey a little easier than mine had been. That gave me purpose." They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The sun was nearly gone now, just a sliver of gold on the horizon. "I wish I had something more to offer you," William said suddenly. "A real home, not just a bunk in a bunkhouse, a future that is more certain than month-to-month wages." Greta stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why would you want to offer me those things?" "Because I am in love with you," he said, the words coming out more bluntly than he had intended, but there they were, the truth laid bare between them. She drew in a sharp breath. In the fading light, he could not quite read her expression. "You do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I know I am not the kind of man who deserves someone like you, but I wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest with you the way you have always been honest with me." "William," she said softly, and there was something in her voice that made him dare to hope. "Do you think I care about what you own or how much money you make?" "I do not know," he admitted. "My father was a teacher in a village school," she said. "We were never wealthy. We had enough to eat and books to read, and that was all we needed. I do not need a grand house or fine things. I need someone who is kind, someone who sees me as a person and not just a convenience, someone who would learn a new language just to understand what I love about words." "Then you feel the same way?" he asked, barely daring to believe it. "I have felt the same way for weeks," she said. "I thought I was being foolish, caring for a cowboy who had no reason to care for a translator. But then you started learning Spanish, and I realized that maybe you did care, that maybe I was not imagining the way you looked at me." He took her hands in his, and they were small and work-roughened, the hands of someone who had known hardship. "May I court you properly, Greta Werner? May I call on you and take you to church socials and all the things that respectable people do?" "Yes," she said, and even in the near darkness he could see her smiling. "Yes, William Harper, you may court me." He wanted to kiss her then, but he knew it was too soon. So instead he just held her hands and looked at her face and felt happier than he could remember being in his entire life. They walked back to the boarding house where Greta rented a small room, and he left her at the door with a promise to see her on Sunday after church. He walked the 12 miles back to the Bar 7 ranch through the warm summer night, not wanting to wait until morning to get back, too full of energy and joy to sleep anyway. Miguel was still awake when William entered the bunkhouse, reading by lamplight. He took one look at William's face and grinned. "She said yes," she said yes, William confirmed. "Then my Spanish lessons were worth the effort," Miguel said. Over the following months, William courted Greta with all the intensity and focus he brought to everything he did. He took her to church socials and town dances, always making sure to have her back to the boarding house at a respectable hour. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, little bouquets of purple asters and yellow sunflowers that she kept in a jar by her window. He continued learning Spanish with Miguel and German with Greta, and he started to feel the languages taking root in his mind, becoming less foreign and more familiar. Greta, in turn, taught him about the immigrants who passed through the station. She helped him understand the courage it took to leave everything you knew and travel to a strange land where people spoke a different language and followed different customs. She read him poetry in German and Russian, translating it for him, helping him see the beauty in the different ways people express the same fundamental human emotions. The other ranch hands teased William mercilessly about being in love, but it was good-natured teasing, and he did not mind. He was in love, deeply and completely, and he did not care who knew it. In September, the owner of the Bar 7 ranch, a man named Douglas Hendricks, announced that he was selling the ranch to a cattle company out of Denver. The new owners would be bringing in their own foremen and workers, which meant that William and the other hands would be out of work come the end of October. William took the news hard. He had been at the Bar 7 for 3 years, longer than he had stayed anywhere since his father died. He had started to think of it as home, or as close to home as he was likely to get. And now he would have to move on, probably to another ranch miles away from La Junta, miles away from Greta. When he told her about the situation, they were sitting on the bench outside the station, watching the sun set. "So you will leave," she said, and her voice was carefully neutral, as though she was trying not to show how much the idea hurt her. "I will have to find work somewhere," he said. "I have some money saved, but not enough to live on for more than a few months." "Where will you go?" she asked. "I do not know yet," he said. "I have been asking around, seeing if any of the other ranches are hiring. There is a place down near Trinidad that might need someone come spring, but that is a 2-day ride from here." Greta was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if you stayed in La Junta, doing what?" he asked. "I am a ranch hand. That is all I know how to do." "You could learn something else," she said. "You learned Spanish. You are learning German. You could learn a trade." "It takes years to learn a trade," he said, "and I would need money to live on while I was learning." "The station manager has been talking about needing someone to help with freight handling," Greta said. "It does not pay much, but it is steady work. And the boarding house where I stay has a room available, smaller than mine but less expensive." William looked at her, understanding dawning. "You want me to stay here?" "I do not want you to go," she said simply. "But I will not ask you to give up ranch work if that is what you love. I just wanted you to know that there might be other options." The truth was, William did not love ranch work the way some men did. He was good at it, and it was honest labor, but it was not a passion for him. What he loved was the open spaces, the freedom of riding across the prairie, but those things did not require him to work on a ranch. He could have those things anywhere in the West. What he loved more than any of that was Greta. "I will talk to the station manager tomorrow," he said. Curtis, the station manager, was skeptical at first. "You are a cowboy," he said. "What do you know about freight handling?" "I know how to lift heavy things and put them where they need to go," William said. "I know how to work hard and show up on time, and I am willing to learn whatever else you need me to know." Curtis studied him for a moment. "This is about the Werner girl, is it not?" "Partly," William admitted. "But I am also tired of moving from ranch to ranch every few years. I want to put down roots somewhere." "The pay is $25 a month," Curtis said. "Half of what you are probably making at the ranch." "I understand," William said. "You start November 1st, Curtis said. "Do not make me regret this." William moved into town at the end of October, taking the small room at the boarding house and selling his horse and saddle to help cover his first few months of rent and expenses. It hurt to let the horse go. A good buckskin gelding named Sam that he had worked with for 2 years. But he would not need a horse for his new work, and he could not afford to keep one just for the sake of it. The freight work was back-breaking and monotonous, loading and unloading crates and barrels and furniture, but William did not complain. He worked hard, earned Curtis's grudging respect, and in his free time, he courted Greta. They fell into a comfortable routine. He would meet her for lunch when both their breaks coincided, and they would sit on the bench outside the station eating whatever simple food they had brought from home. On Sundays, they would go to church together and then walk around town or out onto the prairie, talking about everything and nothing. He continued learning German, and she started teaching him a little Russian as well. He would practice his languages with the immigrants who came through the station, and Greta would watch him with pride as he helped a German farmer understand the freight charges or directed a Russian family to the hotel. In December, the first snow came and William bought Greta a warm shawl from the general store, blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She protested that it was too expensive, that he could not afford it on his wages, but he insisted. "I am going to marry you someday," he said. "And when I do, I want to be able to say that I gave you more than just words." She had tears in her eyes when she wrapped the shawl around her shoulders. "The words are enough," she said, "but I will treasure this always." As winter settled over La Junta, William began to think seriously about the future. He and Greta had been courting for nearly 6 months now, and he knew beyond any doubt that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. But he also knew that he needed to be able to provide for her properly before he could ask her to marry him. His salary as a freight handler was barely enough to cover his room and board and save a few dollars each month. At this rate, it would take him years to save enough money to rent a small house and furnish it modestly. He needed to find a way to earn more money, but he was not sure how. The answer came from an unexpected source. One afternoon in January of 1884, a Polish family arrived at the station, and neither William nor Greta could understand the dialect they were speaking. It was related to Polish. The mother explained in broken English, but different enough that Greta's Polish was not quite sufficient. "I wish we had someone who could speak this dialect," Greta said to William after the family had struggled through purchasing their tickets. "There are so many different variations, and I cannot learn them all." "What if you taught other people to be translators?" William suggested. "You could charge a fee for lessons, and then there would be more people who could help at the station." Greta looked at him with surprise. "I had not thought of that, but who would want to learn?" "There are several Mexican families in town who might want to learn English," William said. "And I bet there are Americans who would pay to learn Spanish or German for business reasons. You could hold classes in the evenings, maybe at the church." The more they talked about it, the more excited Greta became. She approached the pastor at their church, who agreed to let her use one of the Sunday school rooms 2 evenings a week. She posted notices around town advertising language lessons, English for immigrants and Spanish or German for native English speakers, 50 cents per lesson. To her surprise and delight, she had 15 students sign up for her first session. William helped her set up the room, arranging chairs and procuring a chalkboard from the school teacher, who was happy to lend it for such a worthy cause. Watching Greta teach was a revelation for William. She came alive in front of her students, her whole face animated as she explained grammar and pronunciation, as she led them through exercises and conversations. She had a gift for making language feel accessible, for breaking down complex ideas into simple pieces that anyone could understand. The lessons were successful enough that Greta was able to add a 3rd evening session, and then a 4th. By spring, she was making almost as much from her teaching as she made from her work at the station. She continued doing both, driven by her desire to help the immigrants who arrived confused and frightened. But the teaching money gave her a financial security she had not had since arriving in America. It also gave William the confidence to finally ask her the question that had been burning in his heart for months. On a warm evening in April, he took her for a walk out to a spot on the prairie where wildflowers were beginning to bloom, the same purple asters and yellow sunflowers he had brought her the previous summer. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the air smelled of grass and sage. "Greta Werner," he said, taking her hands in his, "I know I am not a wealthy man, and I probably never will be. I cannot offer you a grand house or fine clothes or any of the things that someone as wonderful as you deserves, but I can offer you my whole heart, my complete devotion, and a promise that I will work every day of my life to make you happy. Will you marry me?" She was crying, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. "Yes," she said. "Yes, William Harper, I will marry you." He kissed her then, their first real kiss, and it felt like coming home after a long journey, like finding something he had not even known he was searching for. They were married in June at the small church in La Junta, with Miguel standing up as William's best man and the landlady from the boarding house serving as Greta's matron of honor. It was a simple ceremony, but the church was full of people, immigrants that Greta had helped over the past year, ranch hands that William had worked with, students from Greta's language classes, townspeople who had come to respect this young couple who worked so hard and cared so deeply for each other. Greta wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, and William wore his best clothes, freshly cleaned and pressed. When they exchanged their vows, William said them in English and then repeated them in German, stumbling over some of the words but getting the meaning across. Greta laughed and cried at the same time, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the whole church erupted in applause. They rented a small house on the edge of town, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. William worked at the station during the day, and Greta continued her translating and teaching. In the evenings, they would sit together and practice languages, or William would read to her from the newspaper while she mended clothes, or they would simply talk about their days and their dreams. Life was not easy. Money was always tight, and there were months when they had to choose between buying meat or paying the rent on time. But they were happy in a way that had nothing to do with material comfort, and everything to do with the deep contentment of being with the person you loved most in the world, in the spring of 1885, Greta discovered she was pregnant. William was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. They had even less money now than when they had married, and the thought of being responsible for a child seemed overwhelming. But Greta was calm and confident. "People have been having babies forever," she said. "We will manage." And they did. Their son was born in October of that year, a healthy boy with his mother's dark hair and his father's green eyes. They named him Henry Werner Harper, after Greta's father. William discovered that fatherhood suited him. He loved holding his son, loved watching him grow and change, loved the way Henry would grab his finger with his tiny hand and hold on with surprising strength. Greta was a natural mother, patient and loving, singing German lullabies to Henry and talking to him in multiple languages from the time he was born. "He will grow up speaking English and German and Spanish," she said. "He will have the gift of languages like his mother." "And the stubbornness of his father," William said, watching as baby Henry fought against sleep, his little fists waving in the air. Money became even tighter with a baby to care for, and William began looking for ways to earn extra income. He started doing odd jobs around town in his free time, fixing fences and repairing roofs and hauling supplies for the general store. It meant less time with Greta and Henry, but it also meant they could afford better food and warmer clothes for the baby. Curtis, who had mellowed considerably toward William over the past 2 years, approached him one day with an unexpected offer. "I am getting too old for this job," he said. "My knees hurt all the time, and I am tired of dealing with difficult passengers. I have recommended to the railway company that they promote you to assistant station manager. The pay is $40 a month, and if you do well, you would be in line to take over as station manager when I retire in a few years." William was stunned. "I do not have any management experience," he said. "You have been working here for over a year, and you have not missed a single day," Curtis said. "You are reliable, you work hard, and the passengers like you, especially the immigrants. You would be good at this job." William accepted the position, and with the increased salary, he and Greta were finally able to breathe a little easier financially. They were not wealthy by any means, but they had enough to live on without constant worry, enough to save a small amount each month toward an uncertain future. Greta's language classes continued to grow. She now taught 6 nights a week, with William watching Henry during her evening sessions. She had developed a reputation throughout southern Colorado as an excellent teacher, and people traveled from neighboring towns to take her classes. She published a small book on basic Spanish phrases for English speakers, printed on a hand press by the local newspaper owner who saw potential in the project. It sold modestly but steadily, bringing in a few extra dollars each month. As Henry grew from a baby into a toddler, William taught him to ride by putting him on the gentlest horse at the livery stable and walking alongside, one hand always ready to catch him if he fell. Greta taught him his letters in 3 languages, writing them out on a chalkboard she had purchased for home use. The boy absorbed everything like a sponge, just as his mother had done, and by the age of 3 he could count to 20 in English, German, and Spanish. In 1887, when Henry was 2 years old, the railway company made Curtis the station manager for a larger station in Pueblo, and they offered William the position of station manager in La Junta. It came with a salary of $60 a month, enough that Greta could cut back on her evening teaching if she wanted to spend more time with Henry. But Greta did not want to cut back. She loved teaching, loved seeing her students' faces light up when they finally understood a difficult concept, loved knowing that she was helping people bridge the gap between languages and cultures. Instead, She hired a young Mexican woman named Rosa to help watch Henry during her teaching sessions, giving Rosa free English lessons in exchange for her time. The years passed in a blur of work and family and the small joys of daily life. Henry started school, and then in 1889, Greta gave birth to a daughter they named Clara. She had William's green eyes and Greta's love of words, babbling constantly in a mixture of English and German before she was even a year old. William thrived as station manager. He had a natural ability to solve problems and smooth over conflicts, and he genuinely cared about making the station a welcoming place for travelers, especially immigrants. He hired 2 more translators to work alongside Greta, a Russian woman who had settled in La Junta, and a Czech man who was brilliant with languages but too old for physical labor. The station became known throughout the railway system as one of the most immigrant-friendly stops between Kansas City and Denver. The railway company sent William a letter of commendation, and he framed it and hung it on the wall of his small office, proud of what he and Greta had built together. In 1891, when Henry was 6 and Clara was 2, Greta was offered a position teaching languages at a small college that had opened in Pueblo. The salary would have been triple what she made from her private lessons, and it would have been prestigious work, the kind of opportunity that came along once in a lifetime. She turned it down. Why? William asked her when she told him about her decision. This could change everything for us. We could afford a bigger house, better schools for the children. You would be doing work that matters. My work here matters, Greta said. Every immigrant who comes through that station and finds someone who can speak their language, who can help them understand this strange new country, that matters. Every student in my evening classes who learns enough English to get a better job or enough Spanish to communicate with their neighbors, that matters. And being here with you and Henry and Clara, watching them grow up, that matters most of all. Are you sure? William asked. I am completely sure, she said, and she kissed him. This is where I am supposed to be. This is home. In 1893, the country fell into an economic depression, and the railway reduced services to La Junta, cutting William's salary and forcing him to lay off one of the translators. Money was tight again, but they had been through difficult times before, and they knew how to make do with less. Greta increased her teaching schedule to make up for the lost income, and William took on extra work helping to build an addition onto the church. Henry, now 8 years old, started doing odd jobs around town, running errands for elderly neighbors and helping at the general store, bringing home a few pennies each week that he insisted on contributing to the household fund. You do not have to do this, William told his son. You should be playing with your friends, being a child. I want to help, Henry said, and William recognized his own stubbornness in the boy's set jaw, his own determination in the way Henry met his eyes without flinching. The depression lasted for years, and there were times when William worried that they would lose everything, that he would fail as a provider and a father. But Greta never wavered in her faith in him, in their family, in their ability to survive whatever hardships came their way. We have each other, she would say. We have our health and our children and meaningful work. We have more than many people in this world. And she was right. They had more than enough. In 1896, the economy began to recover and the railway restored full service to La Junta. William's salary was returned to its previous level, and he was able to hire back the translator he had laid off. Greta published a second language guide, this one focusing on German phrases for English speakers, and it sold well enough that she began working on a third book about Russian. Henry, now 11 years old, showed an aptitude for mathematics and engineering that surprised both his parents. He spent hours designing elaborate bridges and buildings out of sticks and string, calculating loads and stresses with a precision that seemed almost uncanny in someone so young. William encouraged this interest, buying Henry a used textbook on engineering from a traveling book salesman and helping him work through the problems. Clara, at 7, was more like her mother, fascinated by languages and stories. She could read in English and German by the time she was 5, and she was constantly begging Greta to teach her new words in Russian and Spanish and any other language she could think of. She also had a gift for music, singing in a clear, pure voice that brought tears to Greta's eyes. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, the kind of everyday happiness that is easy to take for granted until it is gone. William and Greta had been married for more than a decade now, and they had built a life together that was rich in all the ways that mattered, even if they would never be wealthy in terms of money. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1899, William took Greta back to the spot on the prairie where he had proposed to her, the same field of wildflowers that bloomed every spring. They left the children with Rosa for the afternoon and walked hand in hand through the purple asters and yellow sunflowers, remembering the young people they had been when they first fell in love. "You ever regret it?" William asked. "Staying here in La Junta instead of taking that teaching position in Pueblo or moving to a bigger city where there would be more opportunities?" "Never," Greta said without hesitation. "This is where I am supposed to be. This is where we are supposed to be together." "I learned your language to court you," William said, smiling at the memory. "I thought that if I could speak Spanish and German, you would see me as something more than just a cowboy." "I never saw you as just a cowboy," Greta said. "I saw you as someone kind and honest and willing to grow, willing to learn. The languages were wonderful, and I loved that you cared enough to learn them, but I would have loved you even if you had never spoken a word of anything but English." "I know," William said. "But I am glad I learned them anyway. It opened up the world to me in ways I never expected. It helped me understand what you see in people, what you hear in their words." They stood there in the field of wildflowers, holding each other as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold just as it had on the day he proposed. They were older now, marked by years of hard work and worry, and the everyday struggles of making a life together, but the love between them had only deepened with time. In 1900, as the new century dawned, the railway company offered William a position as regional manager overseeing several stations across southern Colorado. It would mean a significant increase in salary and prestige, but it would also mean traveling constantly, being away from home for weeks at a time. He discussed it with Greta, laying out the pros and cons, the opportunities and the sacrifices. They could afford a much nicer house, could send Henry and Clara to better schools, could finally have some financial security in their old age. But William would miss watching his children grow up, would miss the daily rhythms of life with Greta, would become a stranger in his own home. "What do you want to do?" Greta asked. "I want to stay here," William said. "I want to keep doing what I am doing. I want to come home every night to you and the children. I want to keep helping immigrants at the station and watching Henry build his bridges and listening to Clara sing. I want this life we have built together." "Then that is what we will do," Greta said. William turned down the promotion, and he never regretted it for a moment. Henry went on to study engineering at the Colorado School of Mines, earning a scholarship that covered most of his expenses. He graduated near the top of his class and got a job with the railway company designing bridges and tunnels, work that he loved, and that paid well enough to support his parents when they grew older. Clara became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps but focusing on music and languages. She taught at the school in La Junta, and in 1908 she married a kind young man who worked as a bank clerk, a quiet fellow who adored her and treated her like she hung the moon. William and Greta continued working at the station until 1910, when William was 51 and Greta was 47. They retired with modest pensions from the railway company and spent their days gardening, reading, and volunteering at the church. Greta continued to teach occasional language classes, unable to fully give up the work she loved, and William helped her, his German and Spanish now fluent after decades of practice and use. They watched their grandchildren come into the world, Henry's 2 sons and Clara's daughter and son, and they marveled at how much life could change and yet stay fundamentally the same. The children played the same games they had played, asked the same questions, needed the same love and attention. On a summer evening in 1920, when William was 61 and Greta was 57, they sat on the porch of their small house, the same house they had rented when they first married, which they had eventually been able to purchase. The sun was setting over the prairie, painting the sky in familiar shades of pink and gold, and they held hands the way they had been holding hands for more than 35 years. "You remember when you first came to the station?" Greta asked. "You pretended you had business there, but really you just wanted to see me." "I was not very subtle," William admitted. "No, you were not," Greta said, laughing, "but I like that about you. You were honest about your feelings even when you tried not to be." "I loved you from the first moment I saw you," William said. "I loved the way you cared about those immigrants, the way you tried so hard to help them understand. I loved your kindness. And I loved that you saw that in me," Greta said. "I loved that you did not just see a translator or a poor immigrant girl, but someone worth knowing, worth learning a new language for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky, listening to the sounds of the town settling in for the night. Somewhere down the street, children were playing, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. A dog barked. A door closed. Life continued in all its ordinary beauty. "We have had a good life," William said. "We have had a wonderful life," Greta corrected. "We have had exactly the life we were supposed to have." And sitting there on that porch, holding hands with the person he loved most in the world, William knew she was right. They had never been wealthy, had never traveled to distant places or done anything that would make them famous or even particularly notable. But they had loved each other deeply and raised good children and helped countless people navigate the difficult journey of coming to a new country. They had built something lasting out of love and words and the simple determination to understand each other, to meet each other in the middle, to bridge the gaps between their different worlds. That was more than enough. That was everything. In 1925, William and Greta celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Henry gave a toast, talking about how his parents had shown him what it meant to work hard and care for others. Clara sang a song in German that Greta had taught her when she was a little girl, her voice still clear and beautiful. The grandchildren presented them with a gift they had all contributed to, a book of family memories and photographs, documenting 40 years of marriage and the life they had built together in La Junta. William and Greta looked through it together that night, pointing out favorite moments, laughing at old photographs, marveling at how quickly time had passed. 40 years, William said. "It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I would do it all again," Greta said. "Every difficult moment, every struggle, every sacrifice. I would do it all again exactly the same way if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," William said. They continued to age together gracefully, supporting each other through the aches and pains that came with growing older, through the loss of friends and the changing world around them. The automobile replaced the horse, the telephone connected people across vast distances, and the world became both smaller and more complex. But through all the changes, their love remained constant, a steady anchor in a shifting world. In 1932, when William was 73 and Greta was 69, they sat together in the living room of their little house, the same house where they had raised their children, where they had laughed and cried and built a life together. William was reading the newspaper, and Greta was knitting a blanket for their newest great-grandchild, Henry's first grandchild, when she suddenly put down her needles. "William," she said softly. He looked up immediately, recognizing something in her tone. "What is it?" "I just wanted to tell you that I love you," she said. "I wanted to make sure you knew." "I know," he said, putting down the paper and taking her hand. "I have always known." "Good," she said, and she smiled at him, the same smile that had captured his heart nearly 50 years earlier at the train station. They sat there holding hands as the afternoon light faded, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing each other so completely that words were often unnecessary. They had spent a lifetime learning languages together, but the most important language they had learned was the language of love, of partnership, of two people choosing each other every day for 50 years. William and Greta lived out the rest of their years in that little house in La Junta, surrounded by the love of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They died within months of each other in 1935, Greta in February and William in May, as though neither could bear to live long without the other. They were buried side by side in the cemetery on the edge of town, under a simple headstone that read, "William Harper and Greta Werner Harper, beloved parents and grandparents." But those who had known them remembered them as much more than that. They remembered William as the cowboy who learned languages to court the woman he loved, who became a station manager and helped thousands of immigrants find their way in a new land. They remembered Greta as the translator who made a home for herself and others in a foreign country, who taught languages to anyone willing to learn, who never forgot what it was like to be a stranger in a strange place. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy. Henry's bridges still stood across rivers and canyons throughout Colorado, monuments to careful engineering and his father's encouragement. Clara's students went on to become teachers themselves, passing on the love of language and music that she had learned from her mother. The little house where they had lived was eventually sold to a young couple starting out, just as William and Greta had started out so many years before. The new owners found a box in the attic, full of old language books and notebooks filled with William's careful attempts at Spanish and German, chronicling his early efforts to learn the languages of the woman he loved. The new wife showed the notebooks to her husband, who was touched by the evidence of such devotion. "He learned all this just for her," she said. "That is real love," her husband replied, and it was. It was real love in its purest form, the kind of love that crosses barriers of language and culture, that endures through hardship and poverty, that grows stronger with time rather than weaker. It was the kind of love that built families and communities, that changed lives in quiet but profound ways. The immigrants who had passed through La Junta station in those early days told their children and grandchildren about the translator woman and the station manager who had helped them, who had made them feel welcome in a scary new world. Those stories were passed down through generations, becoming part of the fabric of family history. And in La Junta, Colorado, in the church where William and Greta had married and raised their children, their story became legend, The story of the cowboy who learned languages to court the translator, who built a life with her based on love and mutual respect, and the determination to understand each other fully. It was a simple story in many ways, without grand gestures or dramatic moments, but it was also a profound story about what it means to truly love someone, to be willing to enter their world and see through their eyes, to value what they value and honor what they hold dear. William Harper had been a simple ranch hand when he first saw Greta Werner at the train station, but love had transformed him into something more, someone willing to grow and change and learn. Greta had been a frightened immigrant girl alone in a foreign country, but she had found the courage to build a new life, to use her gifts to help others, to open her heart to love again after losing so much. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love that bridged languages and cultures, a partnership that made both of them better than they would have been alone, a family that carried forward their values of kindness, hard work, and the profound importance of understanding and respecting those who are different from ourselves. Their great-grandchildren, growing up in a world very different from the Wild West of the 1880s, still heard the stories about great-grandpa William learning Spanish to impress great-grandma Greta, about how they had met at the train station and fallen in love across the barriers of language and culture. The children asked to hear the stories again and again, never tiring of the romance of it all, the proof that true love could overcome any obstacle. And perhaps that was the greatest legacy William and Greta left behind. Not the languages they taught or the immigrants they helped or even the children they raised, but the example they set of what love could be when two people committed themselves fully to each other, when they chose every day to honor and cherish and understand one another. In the end, William had been right when he told Greta on their 15th anniversary that learning her language had opened up the world to him. But what he had not fully understood then, what perhaps he only understood in those final years when they sat together in comfortable silence, was that the greatest language he had learned was not Spanish or German or Russian. It was the language of Greta's heart, the unspoken communication that passed between them with a glance or a touch, the deep understanding that came from a lifetime of loving someone completely. That was the language that mattered most, the one that sustained them through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship, through all the years of their long and beautiful life together. And that language, the language of true and abiding love, needed no translation at all.